The Jungle Book was released in 1967 by Walt Disney Animation and was directed by Wolfgang Reitherman and was the final animated film of the Silver Age and the last animated film to be made while Walt Disney was still living. The movie is based on the novel of the same name by Rudyard Kipling and follows Bagheera the panther and Baloo the bear, who have difficulty trying to convince the boy Mowgli to leave the jungle for the human world. The time has come to talk about the final film in the Silver Age, and it's ultimately a good one to end on as it possesses much of the heart and fun of many of Disney's best efforts. Although I don't think it succeeds in being one of the studio's best films, it's memorable in its own right. The thing is, while I enjoy this film and think it's a good movie, I think everything about it was ultimately improved in the 2016 live-action remake directed by Jon Favreau, which I find to be not only the best live-action Disney remake, but one of my favorite movies, period. That said, there's still a lot that this film has to offer, and we'll be getting into that soon. The Jungle Book was first considered by Walt Disney as early as the 1930s, but it wouldn't be until the completion of The Sword and the Stone in 1963 that story artist Bill Peet would propose The Jungle Book as their next animated feature. With Disney on board, they bought the rights to all the Jungle Book stories, and Peet began working on early story treatments and character designs for the film. Initially, the movie was to remain closer to Kipling's work and make it more naturalistic and fantastic like Bambi. Peet intended to make the story much more linear as the stories were much more episodic and decided to make it a singular journey of Mowgli returning to the Man Village with plot points not only borrowed from the first book but the second Jungle Book as well. After the box office underperformance of The Sword and the Stone, Walt Disney wanted to be more hands-on than he had been with the past two films, and helped in brightening up the film's tone, which he believed was much too dark and needed to be aimed more at families. Due to these issues, Peet would eventually leave and rewrites would be made by Larry Clemens. The film would also use the same Xerox processing as the previous two efforts and the repurposing of animation, which was popular with director Wolfgang Reitherman, which he would continue to do in the next handful of films by the studio. The animations, such as the wolf cubs, were redrawn from the Dalmatians in 101 Dalmatians, among others. The score would be composed by George Bruns, and 6 original songs were written by the Sherman Brothers and 1 by Terry Gilkyson, who wrote The Bare Necessities. The Jungle Book was released on October 18th of 1967, and on a budget of $4 million, the film went on to be a massive box office success with a domestic box office gross of $11.5 million, and would go on to make a worldwide gross of $378 million due to multiple re-releases through the years. Reception for the film was also positive and influenced by the death of Walt Disney, and the praise for it has continued to this day, marking it as a classic of Disney animation and one of the best of the Silver Age. Now, getting into the film proper, The Jungle Book is a really fun film. It has such likable characters, and they're all incredibly fun and memorable. Bagheera, Baloo, King Louie, Mowgli himself, and especially the villain Shere Khan are names that have become synonymous with not only the Disney brand, but also in pop culture. Everybody knows The Bare Necessities. It's one of the most well-known Disney songs, and I think that The Jungle Book does a really good job of being just a fantastic musical overall. The songs are so upbeat and fun, which is such a contrast to the other songs of this era, which have been really good, but none have been as singable, I think, as the songs in The Jungle Book. I think by the late 60s, Disney films with songs in them were just becoming a whole lot more memorable and singable, and it's just a whole lot more fun overall. I also really enjoy the episodic nature of this story. Originally, they said they wanted to have like a through-line story, but the story does end up being episodic. And it's funny because I kind of criticized that for The Sword in the Stone, but here I think it works a lot better because there is a central goal to achieve at the end of this film. Mowgli needs to get to the Man Village, and Shere Khan is after him. So every little side detour is kind of just part of the story. So you have your, run-in with Kaa the snake. You have your run-in with Baloo and King Louie and the elephants and the vultures. And that is all really, really fun, and I think works in the film's favor as compared to The Sword of the Stone. But The Jungle Book just is really fun with characters. Every one of them just is brought to life with some really energetic voice acting, especially from Baloo and also the sinister Shere Khan, who sadly is not in the film that much, being relegated towards the very end of the film, but he does really, leave a good impression on you as this very sinister, dark kind of villain. Also just do a good job of making Mowgli likable. He's not whiny, he gets into trouble a lot of the times, and he's just kind of naive about the world around him, and he's clumsy, and I think it makes him rather likable in the best kind of way. And he's just overall really fun to be around. Really, the heart of the film is his relationship with Bagheera and Baloo. And when they ultimately have to say goodbye to him, it's really, heartbreaking in a way and also satisfying. It's a very uplifting Disney film that I do think stays true to a lot of the themes of the Disney brand. And it does it in such a masterful way. I also really appreciate, with being Walt Disney's final film before he died, that the film actually does open up like several of the other Disney films with a storybook opening. That just really is satisfying to me. It feels like you're bookending Walt Disney's career in that sense, and I think it does a really good job for this story. Ultimately, Jungle Book is about a boy kind of finding his place and eventually, going into this man village to live a new life away from the dangers of the jungle. And that's ultimately the best thing I could say with the film, is it's a lot of fun to watch. But it's also, I think, a tad dry at times as well. Not all of the segments are the most entertaining, and even though it does have a, through-line story for the most part, and I do think it works a lot better than, say, The Sword in the Stone, with its kind of fractured episodic narrative, sometimes the narrative just isn't as entertaining as others. But it is fun nonetheless. The music is incredible. The character work is fantastic. But it just has that timeless quality to it that makes it, in a lot of people's eyes, a classic Disney film. It's just not necessarily one of my favorites. I think a lot of the film is improved in the live-action remake by having a more straightforward story, by focusing on things from the book a little bit more. But what is here cannot be denied that it is fun. It is lighthearted, and it's not one of Disney's best efforts, but it is a satisfying end note to end Walt Disney's career on, and I think that's worth saying something. I also really love the animation in it, and I think it does a really good job with the Xerox processing in particular. It doesn't feel as rough-edged as something like 101 Dalmatians or The Sword in the Stone. It does feel a little smoother. But also there were instances where I noticed where they reused some animation cells, or they just straight up, I swear, they copy the deer that we see in Bambi, of all things. And I found that kind of distracting in some ways, and I'm interested to get into the new era of Disney, which I call the transitional era. If you don't know why I call the Dark Age the transitional era, just watch Joe the Disney Guy's videos. That's where I learned about this term there. And in that era, there are a lot of films that reuse animation, and I'm just interested to see if that becomes a bit distracting for me, because I know they reuse things that are in this film. But that is, a little bit down the line. But overall, this movie is a ton of fun. It's always a blast to watch. The music is really the standout. It is the most memorable thing of the film, besides the character work. But overall, it's really awesome. So with all that said, I'm going to give The Jungle Book a 7 out of 10. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm excited to move on to the next era of Disney. And before I sign off here, I will mention that I want to move a little faster with these Disney reviews. I've only been doing one a month, but there are so many movies that I have to get through that I think I'm going to start moving to doing 2 Disney animated reviews a month for the foreseeable future, just so that I can get them done quicker. So look forward next month to not only 1 but 2 Disney reviews. So anyway, that's all I've got for you. So as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And stay positive.